Okay guys, I have a build video for you today. This is called the staged heating coil, and the basic concept of it is that you have two wires in parallel. One has lower resistance than the other one, so they heat up unevenly, and one of them heats up quicker than the other one. And I can't remember who coined this term, the exact person. I was building coils like this for a while, and then someone on Reddit, during that Bombies competition, I tried looking back in my history, I couldn't find it on coil porn on Reddit. But they use the term staged heating coil, and I think it's a really appropriate name for this kind of coil, just because you have one part that heats up faster, and then the next part heats up again. And on this video, I know my videos get really long, because there's a pretty involved process usually for the build of the coil. So what I'm doing this time is down below in the description, I'm going to have timestamps, so you can just click on one of the times that are labeled at the part. If you want to skip the part that's making the wire, or skip the part that's wrapping the coil, because you already know how, or if you just want to skip around and keep rewatching the macro shots or something like that, you can do that. Hopefully I'll have that set up down below. So let's go ahead and get started on the build video. Okay, this is kind of like my first design on this staged heating coil, where I'd have a thicker piece of twisted wire, in this case spiral wire. It's 4 strands of 28 gauge nichrome, and then in between there I got 4 wraps of 30 gauge nichrome, 3 strands. And when I fire this up, you'll notice that 30 gauge in the middle heats up first, and then the 28 gauge spiral wire comes in afterwards. So what you do is you kind of cancel out the ramp up time that larger wire has, and that's the basic concept of a staged heating coil, where you'll have 2 separate wires, one with a lower resistance or one with less mass than the other one, so it heats up quicker. If you just had those 30 gauge, I mean, it would produce quite a bit of vapor, but once it gets going, then the larger twisted wire has time to ramp up and really kick in with the extra vapor on there. So that's the basic concept. I'm going to show a few more examples here, and then the last example will be what the build video is going to be on. Just looks kind of like a standard 11 wrap micro coil, but it's actually a parallel, and one of the parallel wires has 5 wraps, the other one is 6 wraps. And so for a split second when we fire it up, you should be able to see a minor staged heating effect. Goes out of focus immediately. Try again here. Well, you can't really see it on video, but I was just doing this one as kind of an example, just showing that you could even get the same effect just from a couple of wires. I got the 4 strands of 28 gauge paralleled with 2 strands of 28 gauge, and so even though that 4 strand is probably higher or lower resistance than the 2 strand, the 2 strand heats up faster just because it has less mass there. So you'll notice it does get some of that staged heating effect in there. And another thing about these guys is that you'll notice that smaller wire there has 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps, whereas that larger gauge wire has 5 wraps. And the reason I do that, and I'll show you how in the build video, is so that you don't have an extra piece of, if you did 5 wraps on that little one, you'd have an extra piece on the outside there. Wouldn't be symmetrical. And I mean, this adds also to the staged heating effect as well, by having that wire shorter. So that's another example. Let's move on to one more here. It's the coil that I'm about to do the build video on. So you got a fused Clapton on the outside there, and it's 2 strands of 28 gauge nichrome 80 wrapped with 36 gauge nichrome 60, and next to it we got 4 wraps of 2 pieces of 28 gauge spiral wire. So you got the fused Clapton 28 gauge, which is 5 wraps, and then 4 wraps of that spiral wire. And I'll just fire it up. You see how the center lit up way before that Clapton lit up, so you don't have any sort of ramp up time from that Clapton coil, and then also you still get all the flavor benefits from both of these wires. And the fused Clapton holds so much juice that as vapor, as this heats up faster, the spiral wire, the fused Clapton actually will feed juice into those coils. You just have constant juice feeding through here. And I used one of these setups, a dual coil, for weeks and weeks, and it would take a long time for it to get gunked up. And I think that's probably because it was just feeding juice in so well. But this is what the build video is going to be on, so I hope you enjoy it. That's about it. Okay, we're going to need some things for this build. 28 gauge wire. I'm using nichrome 80 low resistance wire from Lightning Vapes. You could also use 28 gauge Canthal. A good place to get that is Temco, or Lightning Vapes also sells it. I'm using 36 gauge nichrome 60 from Jacobs online. It's like 10 bucks for 250 feet or something. I really prefer Canthal, but Temco was out of it when I wanted to buy it, so that's why I'm using nichrome here. You're going to need some pliers and some clippers and something to wrap the coil on, and of course, like most of my videos, a drill. An optional item that would be super helpful is a vise with a screwdriver, and I'm going to show you that setup that I use for making fused Claptons now, and then we'll get into the build. A little trick I learned while making Clapton coils is a real easy way to spool this stuff and have it just use as much as you need. So I got a vise. You could use any vise you want. I'm sure there's some other way to do this with a different setup, but the basic concept is you stick this through here, screwdriver, you know, most resistance wire has a hole in it. Stick the other part of the screwdriver into the vise and tighten it down a little bit. And you get it to the point where this spool can kind of freely spin, and there's enough weight on this to where you can just grab your wire, and as you're making the Clapton, it spools it out and it pulls that. And so when I figured this out, I was pretty happy because it works really well. You don't waste any wire, and it makes it super easy to deal with that little tiny gauge of wires. You're just using it on demand. Alright, I just want to show you that little setup. And before getting started, I would recommend straightening out, I don't know, about 8 pieces probably of the 28 gauge that you're going to be using. Just to have them ready. It's going to make it a lot easier. And what you can do is straighten out a huge long piece and then cut them into sections, so you don't have to keep putting tiny wires into the drill. That should save quite a bit of time for you. For the fused Clapton, I already did a whole video on it, so I'm just going to kind of do the beginning of it, and then the end of it. I want to show you something at the end, kind of a thing that I didn't include in the last video. So just take 2 of your wires, twist them up at the end like that to give the drill something to hold on to. And when you're starting the fused Clapton, what I would recommend doing is grabbing the wire just like usual, put it into the drill chuck, find a space for it. There we go. It's the wrong direction. And at the beginning part, just to get a section, you can just hold the wire like this and just let it lead up the Clapton portion until you get enough length away from the drill. Once you have enough length away from the drill where you can grab this without having your finger getting caught on it, go ahead and just grab a little bit better. And once you get into the groove of it, you can increase the speed. And as long as you're in the right groove, you just want to relax your arm and just let this wire just wrap itself, because as the wire wraps around, it's going to start pulling your hand, and just allow that to follow. I'm going to pause it and finish this wire up and show you something at the end. Okay, so for the most part I have got this finished. It's just this little end part. Still needs to be done here. Let me pull it back out. And so all I do is just keep it on the same groove and just keep going. And once it gets to the end, it's just going to break off on its own. It just twists off, comes off like magic, so you don't have to clip it or anything like that. That's the fused Clapton part. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one. Alright, now we're going to make the 2-strand 28 gauge spiral wire section. So just go ahead and grab 2 more pieces, twist them up at the ends, just to give the drill something nice to hold on to here. Tighten it down real good. Grab these as parallel as possible. Hold on to the ends with some pliers. And when you first start twisting this, make sure you're holding a nice amount of pressure so that these twist up evenly. But once it's all twisted up uniformly, you want to allow this hand to get contracted in with that wire, just so you get a nice tight twist on it. There we go. And then we're just going to spiral this up, so get that out of there. Go ahead and stick this most uniform part of the wire back into the drill. And it's going to be very similar to the spiral wire video now. There's going to be one difference though, just because I figured out something accidentally one time. And I'm just going to clip the end off here too, so it doesn't mess with this. Alright. So something I do now usually when I make spiral wire is I'll take my toothless pliers and I'll actually put like a drop of glycerin or whatever e-juice I have on the pliers, and that lubricates them and makes it less likely for this wire to break as you're doing it. It also gives you a little bit more smoothness to the wire, and you can add a little bit more pressure. So make sure you're going in the same direction that you were twisting this wire in the first place. You don't want to go against it. And just as a review, this first pass with these pliers is going to be real light, just to make sure it's nice and twisted uniformly. Not too much pressure on the pliers. Alrighty. Second pass, put a little bit more pressure. And a little bit more. Okay, if you're doing this with Kanthal, you're probably going to have to go over it a few more times. Since this is the Nichrome 80, it's quite a bit softer, and so this is already flat enough for me. Basically what you should be looking at when you're finished, just straighten out the fused Clapton using 2 sets of pliers, just going an inch at a time and just untwist it. And then for the spiral wire, make sure to clean it really well and wash it. I like to use dish soap and rinse it with warm water for about a minute just to get all the metal debris, and especially after using e-juice to lubricate your pliers, you want to make sure to get all of that stuff off of there. but that's basically what you need for the build, so let's move on. Okay, so you should have the piece of the 2-strand 28 gauge spiral wire, and then also the fused Clapton with 28 gauge on the inside there. And what I like to do is have the fused Clapton around the outside of the wrap, and then the spiral wire on the inside. So just go ahead and start them with on the left side. Well, it depends which way you're wrapping the coil, but for me, on the left side, and then the spiral wire over on the right side. Grab whatever you're wrapping it on. And there's two ways of doing it. I'm going to show you this way first, where you just wrap it together. So just like usual, just wrap just like you're doing a parallel coil. And they like to separate from each other on the first wrap. You just go ahead and push it in a little bit, and as you wrap it, it should pull together pretty nicely. Okay, so I've done 4 wraps so far. And if you just imagine if you did the same number of wraps of each wire, you're always going to have this extra little piece right here. And it's not going to look symmetrical. And so the way around that is we're going to do just these 4 wraps, leave it like this with that spiral wire, and we're going to take that fused Clapton by itself and do 1 more additional wrap. And it'll come down right on the outside of that. And then you end up with symmetry, which I like, and then also it increases the staged heating effect because you got just 4 wraps of the other one and 5 of the fused Clapton. So that central wire is going to heat up. The 4 wraps of the spiral is going to heat up way faster than the Clapton portion. And since the Clapton portion wicks so well, it's going to feed juice to that low resistance central coil. That's the first way to do it. I'll go ahead and grab some more wire and show you the other way. Okay, and the second way of doing it is to grab your fused Clapton portion, or whichever other is your larger wire that you're using, and you just go ahead and wrap a spaced coil with that. And all that means is that each wrap is not touching. Now with the kind of wires that I'm using today, it doesn't really matter which order you go in or which way that you do it, because both wires are real similarly sized. We'll go ahead and just do the 5 wrap and just try to keep it as evenly spaced as you can. And sometimes you can even just kind of, like the part that's uneven there, you can just adjust it to make it even. And then you would just take your other wire and come on through and fill the gaps. And depending on which kind of depending on which kind of staged heating coil you're making, it depends which one is going to work better. Like this method works really well if you got like a larger twisted wire and then in the center you have a bunch of tiny parallels. Make it spaced first and then wrap those parallels in between. It makes it much easier than trying to wrap all those parallels with that larger wire at the same time. For this one where you got 2 pretty similarly weighted wires, I would suggest probably just doing it that first way. It seems a little bit easier. So if the wires are closer to the same size, then I would just do it like just wrapping a regular parallel coil. But if you got like a bunch of little tiny wires you need to throw in the gaps, then I would go with this way. And to mount this, this is mutation-x version 2. It's a pretty good little atomizer. It's just those screws up there kind of bother me. But so for mounting this guy, you just want to go ahead and stick it through and try to keep track of which wire, like the inside wire, you know, keep it on the inside of the coil. And then the outside wire, you just want to keep them in the same direction going through those posts. And I'm just going to pull on these guys, get them in, and then once I have these in the spot that I want them, I go ahead and tighten that guy down. Get this cinched down all the way here. And then for that other one, I like to hold pressure on this screwdriver. Just flip it around so you can see what I'm doing. Hold pressure on the screwdriver that direction while I pull this guy back in. And my thumb's right in the way. Alright, let me show you what happened here. So these guys are kind of pulling up on me, so I'm just going to pull on this spiral wire individually just to get it cinched in there. And that's pretty much in place. I'll tighten it down. There we go. Alright, and let's clip these leads off. I can start test firing it. And just like the fuse Clapton, you just kind of pulse it a few times and stick your screwdriver through afterwards. Just try to get this evenly firing. There we go. Should see the fused Clapton lighting up after that spiral wire for the staged heating effect. And I'll just throw some juice on here real quick. And then just burn it off. Instantaneous. Alright. I'll pause it and then wick this guy up. So I just cut off a piece of Japanese cotton. I'm going to roll the end. And just stick it through here. And someone last time commented for me to take off that outer coating on the Japanese cotton and try it out, and I tried it, and I still prefer this way. It's a lot easier. I probably like it because it looks nicer. But it works great for me. But everybody has their own way of wicking, so wick it however you want. Okay. It's ready to go. I'm it out and let's see how it performs. Alright, with the Nichrome 80, using the Nichrome 80 for this build, we're getting a 0.26 ohms for a single coil. For a dual, it's probably going to be closer to the 0.13, 0.14, somewhere around there range. Really depending on what the posts are made of. I'm probably going to dual this for myself, but a single coil, I mean, it's going to perform pretty well. And some performance on this guy. Does pretty well. I'm probably going to dual this for myself here.